You're listening to an Airwave Media Podcast.
When you need mealtime inspiration, it's worth shopping Baker's, where you'll find over 30,000 mouth-watering choices that excite your inner foodie. And no matter what tasty choice you make, you'll enjoy our everyday low prices, plus extra ways to save, like digital coupons worth over $600 each week. You can also save up to $1 off per gallon at the pump with fuel points. More savings and more inspiring flavors make shopping Baker's worth it every time. Baker's, fresh for everyone. Fuel restrictions apply.
Hello. Now, I'm not Katie, I'm not Nathan, and you are still listening to the awesome Queen's podcast. Now, I'm Jackson from the History of Jackson podcast, and I have a small message from Katie and Nathan. They want you to know that they use explicit language on their show, so you're not going to be listening to any of these. But if you are not interested in that, then this is not your cup of tea. But I know that you're going to love these episodes that they've got lined up for you on the Wars of the Roses. However, if you like the Wars of the Roses, then you'll love our recent episode with historian of the period, Nathan Amen, about his book, Son of Prophecy, The Rise of Henry Tudor. Now, I will leave you in the hands of Katie and Nathan of the Queen's podcast.
Hi, this is Katie.
And this is Nathan.
And you're listening to Queen's Podcast, the show about badass women in history. Hello, hello, hello.
Hey, girls and gals. Pop it and drink it.
Ooh. So today we are drinking a wine called Momsy wine, which we basically had to scour the earth to find.
Literally, like, I got it shipped from fucking England.
And it's 20 proof, which wine is usually like 12.
No, it's 40 proof.
It's 40 proof?
It's like 20% alcohol. 19 point something percent alcohol. So that's like 20 proof.
Okay.
So it's like super strong.
Yeah. And it tastes interesting. Now we're going to party like it's 1455 because we are talking about the infamous Elizabeth Woodville.
Who hearted Momsy wine.
It was her favorite wine, and we'll get to that later. It's an interesting story. I mean,
so she was the queen consort to Edward IV of England.
Yeah. She was a commoner who married a king for love, and I put commoner in like quotation marks. She was a major player in the Wars of the Roses.
So in her early life, she was born sometime between...
like 1437.
Yeah, 1437 in Grafton, Regis, England, which is about a half an hour drive out of London.
So her family has an interesting history, to say the least.
Yeah.
Even though she's referred to as a commoner, her mother was a dowager duchess.
Yeah, her mom was Jacquetta, sorry.
Which I fucking love the name Jacquetta because it's not Elizabeth, Mary, Catherine.
Yeah,
May.
it's something different.
It's something different.
Yeah, so she's Jacquetta of Luxembourg.
Her line is supposedly started by a mermaid named Melusina or something like that.
Yes, I want to be a mermaid. I'm a goddamn mermaid.
So when she was a teenager, she was married off to the Duke of Bedford. And they didn't have any kids together or anything. And he died just a couple of years after they got married. And she fell in love with the Duke's. Nathan just made
just drank some of that Momsy wine.
A real interesting face. Y'all, this wine kind of resembles like maple syrup.
Yeah, it's like alcoholic maple syrup, but it's like fruity a little bit. Like, it's weird.
I don't know. It definitely is worthy of a face. But I'm like, hey, let's each have like a glass and we won't notice the taste after that. Right. Anyway, Jacquetta. She falls in love with the knight of her Duke husband, and they marry secretly. And that guy's name was Richard Woodville. And it was scandalous, honey.
Oh, hell yes.
It was just a real big fucking deal because she was the king's aunt by marriage and marrying some knight that no one's heard of.
And I mean, this like pretty much sets up Elizabeth's life.
Yeah, yeah. Because they married in secret, and so they kept Elizabeth's birth secret for as long as possible, which is why we don't have a birthday for her. And whenever they finally, outed themselves, like, hey, we're married, they were fined £1,000, which was back then like a huge deal. But they were eventually forgiven by the king, and they went on to have 14 children.
She was fruitful as fuck.
They all are. All these Woodvilles are fruitful as fuck.
And only 12 of them actually, like, survived.
But back then, like, that's
huge.
still a lot of babies that survived. Because, you know, when we talk about, like, Catherine of Aragon, when you talk about her living child to babies that died ratio.
Yeah.
This is
way better.
So Elizabeth was their firstborn.
Yes, and they actually kept it a secret as long as they could. And I read that they got the pardon the same year that she was born.
First, let's talk about like her early life. She had a pretty standard upbringing. She wasn't educated quite as much as some of our other queens, but she wasn't born into royalty. So she was educated, a good education for minor nobility.
Yeah, for a commoner. She was into like sewing. She may have been taught French. She knew how to run a household, you know, basic religious stuff.
When she was a child, 8 or 9, Margaret of Anjou became Queen of England. And Margaret and Jacquetta were like distant cousins. So the Woodvilles were actually put in charge of welcoming Margaret of Anjou to court. Jacquetta was the head lady in waiting to Margaret of Anjou. So it's very likely that Elizabeth spent a good chunk of her childhood at court. And so she wasn't a complete stranger to like how the royals did their thing.
And they were like Lancastrian as fuck. The War of Roses hadn't come to a head just yet.
Yeah.
But it was really starting to boil and things were coming to a head.
So they were in the Wars of the Roses. The Lancastrians are red roses and the Yorks are white roses. So they were red roses, honey, all over the place. So the Wars of the Roses are like super fucking complicated, but I do think it's kind of interesting and important to the story to kind of get a brief description of that.
Yeah, it's basically just a bunch of cousins fighting each other.
Yeah. But like, let me give some background. So the Plantagenet family have been ruling England for about 300 years. A few generations before Lizzie's time, there was a king, Richard II, and he really sucked at being king. Richard II had 2 uncles. One was the Duke of Lancaster and one was the Duke of York. So his first cousin, Henry IV, basically just came in and was like, hey, you really suck at being king, so I'm going to be king now. And everyone was sort of like, yeah, that makes sense. Richard II is an interesting character in himself, but it's not who we're here to talk about. And so that started the line of Lancastrian kings. So 2 generations down the road, Henry VI is now king when Elizabeth Woodville was born. And he kind of sucks at being king too, so we'll talk more about that later.
Yeah, we will.
So his cousin, the Duke of York, basically was acting as de facto king when Henry VI was out of commission. So some people were like, the Duke of York should be king, and some people were like, this dude is getting too big for his fucking britches.
Yeah, the Duke of York was like killed by the Lancastrians.
Yeah, so then they got, the Wars of the Roses was really starting to come to a head, and the Lancastrians and the Yorks fought. And when they captured the Duke of York, and they kind of killed him, like, really in an undignified way. It was dignified to die in war, but they made him, like, a fake crown made of flowers and grass and shit and put it on his head. And they're like, oh, you're the king of weeds or whatever, which kind of is like Jesus in a little bit. Didn't they do that to Jesus?
Yeah. It was fucking brutal.
So anyway, the Duke of York had 3 sons. Edward IV was the oldest, and he was just like, fuck no. And so Edward and his 2 brothers roll in, take down the Lancastrians, and put themselves on the throne. So that is the simplest description of the Wars of the Roses.
That is like trying to sum it up in one little line.
That is as easy as I can make it for you. We could do a whole episode.
Oh, hell yeah, we could.
Just on the Wars of the Roses.
But let's back it up. Bring it back to Liza, Elizabeth.
Liza with a W.
She was fucking smoking hot, guys.
Y'all, by medieval standards, she was just like hot as hot could get.
She had fair skin, blonde hair, big light eyes. Like, she was gorgeous.
It said she's described as having heavy eyelids like a dragon, which I don't really know. Is that a good thing? I guess that's a good thing since everyone's like, yeah, she was so beautiful. Back then, like, they equated fair complexion, fair hair, fair eyes with being pure.
Being a pure
like,
soul.
oh, you have...
I read that too.
You have fair complexion.
How fucked up.
So you must be a good person.
That's so fucked up.
It's fucked up. But lucky for Liza.
She was beautiful.
fit the bill.
Fun fact.
Fun fact.
I did read this about women in this time period. They would pluck their hairline to make their like
foreheads look bigger.
I've got a giant forehead as it is. Like, I wouldn't need to pluck shit. I mean, I guess it was a sign of beauty back then.
Yeah.
So that's what you did.
Okay. Cool. Yeah. At court, she was super popular. And one thing that I read that I found really interesting, Earl of Warwick, who we'll talk about more later, even at one point wrote Elizabeth a letter being like, hey, my boy over here, like some random knight or whatever, my boy over here has got the hots for you. You should totally marry him. And like, are you down? Check yes or no. Basically.
She checked no.
She checked no. She's like, no.
And so when she was about 16, she married her first husband, John Grey.
Mm-hmm.
It was a pretty good match. Like, I think they liked each other.
He was the heir to be a baron, which is like the lowest rank of nobility. Mm-hmm. But still, her father had been made a baron. So that's, marrying within her reign, but still like a good marriage. He was pretty well-to-do from a good family. He was Sir John Grey, so she was called Dame Elizabeth Grey.
And fun story, they're actually the great-great-grandparents of Lady Jane Grey. Let's give a shout-out to our first episode.
Lady Jane Grey! Crazy. So they had 2 sons. Thomas was born in 1455, and then Richard was born 2 years later.
When we get to her baby-making skills later, it's just going to sound like her and John took things really, really, really
They
slow.
took things slow.
I think he wanted to wait because she was younger.
I mean, she was pretty young when they got married. Yeah, so maybe he was...
And I think that benefited her later on. Maybe she wouldn't have been able to have so many kids later on. Spoiler alert.
It's totally... Oh, yeah. She's going to have lots of babies. She was appointed Lady of the Bedchamber to the Queen, to Margaret Anjou, after she got married. She was married. She married well. She was a dame. Dame Liza.
Dame Liza.
Working in the royal household. She was doing okay. Mm-hmm.
That Malmsey wine.
Maple syrup wine, y'all.
So, as we mentioned.
I'm on my second glass. I can't even taste it anymore now.
She was right. So as we mentioned, John, her husband, was a Lancastrian knight, and the Wars of the Roses were really popping off at this point. Pop. Namely, there's this battle called the Second Battle of
St. Albans.
Yes, in 1461. John Grey dies in this battle and is buried at St. Albans Cathedral.
Aww.
So Lizzie has to go back and live with her parents because her in-laws are not giving her the lands that she should inherit.
In-laws were really fucking her over.
Assholes.
So back then, part of a marriage contract with landowning families is that if a woman becomes widowed, she'd have dower lands. So it was lands from her husband's family that she was supposed to inherit, so she wasn't left like...
And her parents, his parents totally fucked her over.
They signed off on it, and they were like, but now that that's happened, and she has 2 sons, I guess I could kind of understand if they're like, no, but she's got 2 kids that's supposed to inherit it too. But they're just like, no, they're just being assholes.
Fucking dick move.
So she's, in quotation marks, desolate and has to go back and live in her parents' castle.
Oh, poor girl. Poor girl. She has to go live in a castle. Fuck.
But, I guess that could be embarrassing. You're like a grown-ass woman with 2 kids and a widow, and you have to go live back with your parents. I could see how you're like, no, I'm supposed to have my own place.
It's like you being like 35 years old and having to go move back in with your parents. Like, you don't want to have to do that shit.
Nightmare. Hope you're not listening, Mom, but I love you. I don't want to live with you again.
So she decided to take matters into her own hands and talk to the king. Which king?
Which king?
There's so many fucking kings in the War of the Roses.
So remember how we said Henry VI kind of sucked at being king?
Really sucked.
It was more that he was incapable of being king due to a series of nervous breakdowns.
Yeah.
First, when in 1453, and he just goes catatonic. England lost some lands in Calais, and he just, he gets news of the battle and just goes catatonic. He can't talk. He just seems like he's sleeping with his eyes open for a year. People have to force feed him. People have to wipe his ass. People have to dress him. And
is that really what you want to rule England?
No. His wife even has a son who's also named Edward, who we'll call Edward Lancastrian, Prince of Wales, because there's so many fucking Edwards in the story.
So many goddamn Edwards.
And so she like presents her son to him a few months into him being catatonic and was like, here is your child. And he doesn't even look at her. He's on another planet, and that planet does not include England, the place that he is king of.
So, really long story short about battles and wars and shit, he was deposed, and Edward IV, the eldest son of the Duke of York, was crowned king in 1461.
Yes. His main posse that you want to, like, names to know for the story. There was one, the Earl of Warwick, who is also called the Kingmaker. That's his cousin who did a lot of work to get Edward on the throne. And so he thought he deserved like lots of kickback for that. Lots of titles, blah, 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 blah.
He wanted money. He wanted power. He wanted all that. The second one was George, the Duke of Clarence, and that's Edward's brother.
Yeah. And then Richard, Duke of Gloucester, his other brother, a.k.a. Richard III. If you're a student of Shakespeare... Hold on.
The biggest villain ever. Anyway, let's get back to Lizzie.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like the only way I'm going to get my son's land is to go straight to the king. And this is where legend and reality...
It's like, what's real?
Always kind of like what's real and what's not. Legend is that she heard the king would be hunting near her parents' property at the forest of Widowhood. Widowhood. So she goes and takes her sons and just waits for his posse to come by. This reminds me of Pompadour just a little bit. Madame Pompadour, waiting in the woods.
A little bit, but like,
beautiful.
Can you imagine for medieval time, the story about damsel in distress? There's this young, beautiful mother standing there with her 2 young sons.
I mean,
just waiting for a king to come by so she can beg for what's rightfully hers. So I don't know how much of that is true, but it's definitely a cool story.
Yeah, so that's one story. And another is that when her father and brother were pardoned for fighting against him, she went to them.
They in their pardoning ceremony or whatever, like she would have gone with him.
I also read that she may have met Eddie at the reading of Parliament of 1454.
I mean, they both grew up at court, though. They could have. It's very well that they would have known each other their whole lives.
But the whole thing is that there wasn't a lot of evidence that Elizabeth was at court.
Yeah,
she was a lady in waiting or bedchamber to Margaret of Anjou, but there was no record of it.
I think it's very likely that they would have met as children, but she is 5 years older than him, and then she got married when she was 16, so he was like 11. Yeah. Yeah, that's so crazy. Again, with Catherine of Aragon, everyone's like, she was so much older than him. No wonder Henry VIII put her aside. He's like, she was like 6 years older than him.
And men would marry girls like 20 years younger than them.
And
like,
Elizabeth
disgusting.
Woodville was 5 years older than Edward, and they never had any problems.
Yeah, right. So basically they knew each other for fucking ever.
Possibly.
Maybe.
We don't know exactly how they met. We're going to go with the under the tree story.
Yes, I agree.
Because it's fun.
It's the most plausible, too. I think it's the most accurate. But he was fucking smitten with her.
Right away.
So allegedly, according to Sir Thomas More, when Eddie tried to fuck her, I mean, okay.
Seduce her.
I mean, I had
Come
to
on,
read the book that
Nathan.
says, fuck. Anyway, whenever he tried to fuck her, she presented him with a dagger.
Yeah, she grabbed his dagger and it's like, if you defile me, like, I'll kill myself or whatever. And he was just like,
bitch, this is turning me.
Yeah.
Oh. Okay, so story about Eddie. Eddie's not used to bitches turning him down.
So he was supposedly like super hot.
Like 6 foot fine.
Funny story. He was 6'4" in a time where like the average height was 5'7" for a man.
But he was 6'5".
And he was 6'5". But no, really, think about that. He must have been such a commanding presence. That is tall for now.
Yeah.
And now him being 6'4" when everyone else is
5'7", which is my height. Like, no hate. Like,
I'm 5'2". I get it. So he must have been a very commanding figure. They say he was super handsome. His official portrait, I don't know. Nobody looks good in these things from the 1400s.
It doesn't look good.
So I'm going to ask you to imagine the guy that plays him in The White Queen.
Yeah.
Who is
gorgeous.
Kings weren't supposed to marry their subjects.
No, hell no. They're supposed to marry royalty.
Yeah, like you marry a foreign princess. And with that, you get dowry. And then you get foreign alliances. And guess what you get from marrying a commoner?
Fucking nothing.
Yes.
No dowry.
It's one of your subjects, and it also just causes problems, which we'll talk about shortly.
And so this made the Earl of Warwick fucking pissed.
Well, but he didn't know for 4 months.
Oh.
So they got married in secret on the Woodville, the Woodvilles this was so the Woodvilles had a chapel on their lands. And so the only witnesses were her mom and one of their servants and
the dude that performed it.
And that's it. And then they spent a week in a cabin on the Woodville grounds. Again, kept it secret from all of Liza's family. They kept it secret from all of the court. The only people that knew were her mom and some servant lady. And 4 months later, he drops this bombshell of so the kingmaker, the Earl of Warwick, is trying to plan these marriages for him.
He's super obsessed with bloodlines and making sure everything's royal and pure.
Well, he had busted his ass to get his cousin on the throne, so now he wants to make him the most epic king ever.
So the first woman that he wanted to marry her off to was Bona of Savoy.
That was the main chick.
Chick.
That was his main goal. Was she the niece of the king of France? And I can't be mad at him for wanting Edward to marry well, because he really did think he was trying to end this squabble with the royal family, get him married off to a rich bitch that's going to bring in lots of lands, lots of money. And the other person that was in running,
totally interesting,
Isabel of Castile.
Love it.
Catherine of Aragon's mom. How different would history be?
Oh my God. So England would have discovered America, right? Well, would she have even commissioned the ships to go across?
Who knows?
We never fucking know.
The Tudors or the Tudor dynasty would be, if it even existed, a million times different.
Let's just say Isabel was better off in Spain with Ferdinand at the time.
How things happened are fine, but it's just fun to think about how different history could be.
Oh, hell yeah. So Warwick is pissed that he didn't get to make this dynastic marriage.
And Edward's mom, whose name is Cecily, is so angry that 1, you've married this nobody, 2, you've married this Lancastrian nobody.
Ugh.
And allegedly, she starts spreading this rumor herself that Edward is actually a bastard that she conceived in an affair she had with an archer in France.
Oh my God.
To spread that rumor yourself, if it actually happened. I mean, that rumor definitely went around and she was contributed with starting it, but it's possible. How spiteful would you have to be to start that about your own kid, though?
Right? That's fucked up.
But so anyway, that's an interesting story. Fucking brutal. Anyway.
So it's time to crown Elizabeth Queen.
Let's get crowned.
Her coronation was lit.
It's
lit. Lit, bitch. Lit. It was... Okay, so I read that it was September 30th, 1464, and Edward was quoted as saying that it should be as grand as their marriage was simple.
Well, because...
they got married in secret.
Yeah, but he wanted to make up for that she was a commoner, so he threw the biggest fucking coronation anybody has ever seen.
Dank shit.
He was like, no, my bride is worth every penny in this country.
He was totally trying to counter this fake news about the whole bastard shit that was the rumors that were starting about all that. So she wore her hair down and wore white, and which was obviously spiritual purity. We still kind of consider it that way.
But her dress was the best quality.
She went barefoot.
She went barefoot to show a sign of what am I looking for there? Meekness,
piety, pious.
Something
not pious, but
to show
just purity.
She was just trying to I don't know.
Humble.
That's what she did. Kings actually don't attend the coronation of their queens because you want the queen to be the highest ranking person there.
Yeah, that's their job. Is to
Warwick
be the house.
Didn't go. But he was conveniently, Edward had asked him to go to France or Spain or something to do some diplomatic thing. So
she's moving the fuck up.
Moving on up
to the east side.
Now the Woodvilles are moving on up. Again, Edward was my wife's family's very important in royalty. You need your family to be well connected and you need to have those strong ties. So he was we need to marry all of your brothers and sisters into nobility, which there was a fucking ton of them.
Basically, all the nobility is like gone.
Yeah, and it was like primarily daughters, so they marry all her brothers and sisters off, except for like her one brother who was already married.
And take one guess as to who this fucking pissed off.
The kingmaker, Warwick.
Warwick! Sorry, I coined that one.
Sorry, like Nathan, like a couple of days into our research of this, Nathan just one day texted me and like he's like, Warwick! And I was like, what? And he was like, Warwick! Warwick! And it was like, oh my god!
Oh my god, it makes so much sense. So, I mean, I totally made like a meme that has like Dick Cheney and it was like War Dick.
Oh, did you make that meme yourself?
Yes, I
That's
did.
hilarious.
Yes, I did. So, Henry Stafford married Catherine Woodville.
And he was the Duke of Buckingham.
Yeah.
Warwick was pissed because he had 2 daughters. And he was like, he always assumed one of his daughters would marry the Duke of Buckingham.
Woodvilles.
All these fucking Woodvilles.
Come out of the woodwork.
Oh my god. Oh my god.
Perfect.
How have I not thought of that yet? All of the Woodvilles come out of the woodwork.
So Liza and Jaquetta got the shit deal of this.
Like
and
everybody in the country was like, these scheming women are taking all the men in the country. But it was Edward that suggested that. But you can't go around talking shit on the king.
No, because you'll get your head cut off.
Oh.
And the babies start coming. Babies on babies on babies.
Racks on racks on racks. Babies on babies on babies.
Like her fucking mother, she's fruitful as fuck.
Super fruitful. So,
to say that Lizzie and Eddie were like compatible is an understatement because he like married for love.
Yeah.
Like he didn't marry to be in this like dynasty. He married for love.
Yeah. And so she has her first daughter who's also named Elizabeth because these people are not creative
at all.
And there was like a huge celebration after Elizabeth was born. She was born in 1466. Even though she was a girl, it was still a big fucking deal.
Yeah, and the
aforementioned... it showed she could do her job.
Yeah, exactly. And the aforementioned Earl of Warwick was her godfather. He was like totally cool with it?
Yeah.
Question mark.
We've briefly spoken about Elizabeth of York before in our Catherine of Aragon Part 1 episode. She's pretty famous.
Yeah, her second son is pretty famous too.
You'll hear about her some more. And I'm sure she'll probably get her own episode one day.
Next came a daughter named Mary who didn't live to be an adult.
Yeah.
She died younger.
Yeah. And then in 1469, a daughter named Cecily was born. So yes, at this point, she'd only had daughters, but there was really no reason to think she wouldn't have sons. I mean, she had 2 sons from her previous marriage. Back then, though, they didn't understand how baby making totally worked.
Baby making.
And they thought if a woman was just having daughters, that she was like somehow slacking on the job, which
fucked up.
So fucked up. Anyway.
And obviously at the time, daughters are used as like bargaining chips.
So they were important, but also barf.
I know, right? So let's go back to like Warwick officially becoming Wardick.
He officially changes his title, Warwick to Wardick.
Yeah, because Nathan said so. And so the Earl...
It's very clever.
So the Earl of Warwick isn't the only one getting pissed. Remember we mentioned earlier the king's brother, the
George, Duke of Clarence. I really do honestly think from all the things I've read about him, dude had some kind of like paranoia disorder or something.
I totally think so. Like super paranoid.
Even at his best, he was still a loose cannon.
Yeah.
To say the least.
And Warwick was like, look, Clarence, you marry my eldest daughter and we are going to get the support.
He's like, I am the kingmaker. I'm the kingmaker. That's why they call me that. I'm going to make you king. Marry my daughter.
And George was like, yeah.
Well, the interesting thing is since the Woodvilles had all been married off to all the other people, all the other men available in England, Warwick had been like, okay, well, you married your sister-in-laws all off to all the other guys. So let my daughters marry your 2 brothers. It makes sense. And Edward had actually said no because he thought that would make Warwick too powerful. And
that makes sense.
And he had actually said no on both accounts. Spoiler alert, it happened both times. Like both of his daughters did marry both of his brothers. But in this one, he was like, all right, Edward's just not giving me anything. I'm going to marry oldest daughter to the Duke of Clarence and make George king.
Lord.
So Warwick raises an army against Edward in 1469, and he captures him.
What a fucking dick.
He captures him.
War dick.
And he takes him as prisoner back to his castle, Warwick Castle, which I've been to. So every time I go to England or anywhere in Europe, I make my friends and family take me to castles because
why not?
We don't have them here.
Yeah.
And like all of Steve's friends are always like, "Why do you want to see a castle?" I'm like, "Because they're fucking cool, and the oldest building I've ever been in America is from like the 1800s."
Yeah, right?
So we went to Warwick Castle, which like started being built in like 1100. It was so fucking cool.
Oh,
it's the coolest castle I've been to in England so far.
Jelly as fuck.
I'm going to Hampton Court next time we go, though. So that should be supposed to be haunted by Catherine Howard.
Oh, shut the fuck up.
Maybe I'll see her.
Oh my God, where's the Ouija board? We need a Ouija board.
No, I have the Ghost Tracker app on my phone. And I'll be like, is there Wi-Fi in here?
What is Wi-Fi in your castle?
What is the Wi-Fi at Hampton Court? The password is Catherine Howard's ghost.
Anyway, let's get back on track. So, Warwick has a rebellion and takes the king as prisoner. And Warwick orders Elizabeth's father and brother, John, to be fucking beheaded at Coventry.
Which is so fucked up because there was like not even any pretense of a trial. Nothing like that. They were beheaded for the simple fact of being related to the queen that he resented so much.
And they even said like Jacquetta, her mom was a fucking witch and she put a spell on her.
She was Jacquetta was put on actual trial for witchcraft, which was the absolute worst thing you could accuse a woman of at that time.
Can you imagine how scared Elizabeth would have been?
And how scared Jacquetta's been.
Oh, well, yeah, she's the one on trial.
You're on trial for witchcraft. Your husband has been beheaded. And then Liza, your mother's on trial for witchcraft. Your father has been beheaded. Your husband has been captured.
Oh, my God. All this shit was because the kingmaker wanted to make fucking Clarence the king.
And
who wants a King Clarence? A King Clarence?
A King Clarence.
Clang.
Nobody.
Nathan's drank too much.
The answer was nobody, because nobody liked Clarence. He was a loose cannon, like we said.
When you need mealtime inspiration, it's worth shopping Baker's, where you'll find over 30,000 mouth-watering choices that excite your inner foodie. And no matter what tasty choice you make, you'll enjoy our everyday low prices, plus extra ways to save, like digital coupons worth over $600 each week. You can also save up to $1 off per gallon at the pump with fuel points. More savings and more inspiring flavors make shopping Baker's worth it every time. Baker's, fresh for everyone. Fuel restrictions apply.
Hi, I'm Neil.
And I'm Lauren.
And we're both moderately successful trivia podcasters.
You co-host Triviality, and I co-host Misinformation, a trivia podcast.
But we decided to get together to make our own podcast, Curated by Chance.
Because we both love to talk about the topics we know a lot about. I'm an art curator who also teaches art history to engineers.
And I'm a filmmaker and author who loves movies. But Lauren hasn't seen a lot of movies. You're telling me you seriously have never seen North by Northwest or The Devil Wears Prada?
What's that? And Neil doesn't know a thing about art. So every week we use 3 random prompts from our trusty algorithm Chance, designed by a NASA scientist.
The great curator.
That will help us come up with weekly topics to tell each other about, whether it be an artwork, a movie, a book,
a pop culture event, a Broadway show, or even a TV show for dads, like Bosch.
So listen in every week to join us, 2 good friends with generalized anxiety disorder who aren't going to apologize for excitedly talking about the things we love for the first time in our lives. They made a TV show about Hieronymus Bosch?
Not the one you're thinking of.
Clarence was spreading that rumor to anybody that would listen of like, hey, my brother is illegitimate. You know, biological father was just some archer in France that my mom had an affair with. And that was like his only leg to stand on. It was so fun.
Eddie was taken prisoner and he's like the model fucking prisoner. Like he's literally being super nice to everybody.
He just chills. Yeah, like he's just like, oh, you want me to stay in this room? Okay. I'll stay in this room. You got a book to read? What can I do? Can I, like, the servants come in to, like, change his sheets or whatever. He's like, can I help?
Yeah.
I don't know if you know me. I'm the king. Can I help with this?
They're like, oh, you don't have any food left? That's okay. I'm the king. It's all right. So he's basically the fucking model prisoner. And everybody, like, all of a sudden they just release him.
Yeah.
Because he was just a nice guy.
Warwick realizes he's got no leg to stand on here.
Yeah.
Like, nobody wants Clarence as king. He has...
Who wants a King Clarence?
He has nothing to really charge the king with. He doesn't have a strong candidate to put ahead of him. He comes to realize, oh, fuck, my son-in-law is a loose cannon, crazy person.
So they just basically,
So
like,
just let him go.
release Eddie, and it's like, they act like nothing ever happened.
They're just like, so we're good. What do you think the conversation before Eddie was released was like?
So, sorry, bro.
Yeah,
Didn't mean
Warwick's
to...
like, can we just pretend this didn't happen?
Yeah, sorry about it.
And Edward's like, yeah, sure. And I really do think Eddie really wanted to be a peacemaker. Like, he legitimately, I think, had the best in heart for the country, and he didn't want these wars to go on if he could help it. He didn't pursue any kind of war or retaliation against Warwick or Clarence.
And I think he was a good king.
He let them both be pardoned, but Liza was like, they killed my father and brother.
Fucking bitches.
And so I'm sure they had a conversation of her being like, you have to do something. They killed my father and brother. And him just being like, look, I get it, but it's for the good of the country. Let's just try to wash our hands of this.
Move on.
And you can just imagine, don't take it personally. Her being like, how can you not take it personally? Anyway, so yeah, he comes home and he's ready to make nice. Liza's not ready to fucking make nice.
No, not at all.
Not even a year later. Like, not even a year later. Work starts shit again.
This commoner queen, we gotta off all these people's heads that are trying to get in the way.
Well, they had political pull now. So
Yeah.
Warwick's Rebellion, the sequel. The king and the kingmaker are being shady. Like,
Shady ladies.
they're being shady ladies.
They hold councils together, but are secretly plotting like this next move to like try to fuck everybody else over.
So there's like this rebellion in the north. Edward's like, hey, I need to go squash this rebellion. Kingmaker, can I count on you?
And the kingmaker's like, yeah, kingy boy, I'll help you out. It's in Lincolnshire. Yeah, I'll be there. And the king shows up at Lincolnshire, and all these bitches at Lincolnshire are screaming for Warwick, for Clarence.
I'm sorry, what?
Like, they are literally chanting for this dude that war did.
So, needless to say, Warwick never met him in Lincolnshire.
Nope.
And Warwick flees to the exiled Queen Margaret of Anjou. And
this is when the Lancastrian castle gets a breath of life,
the
child.
Lancastrians.
Breath of life. Give me life,
Give
honey.
me life, honey.
So Warwick runs off with his youngest daughter, Anne, and meets up with Henry VI's wife, Margaret of Anjou.
So something to remember about this woman, Margaret of Anjou, is she's ruthless AF.
That's as fuck.
Her husband has been deposed, and she is out for blood for their son. Remember Edward, the Prince of Wales of Lancastrians.
And like we said, I think it's interesting that a lot of these are just like a bunch of mothers fucking
oh my
for
God.
their
No,
children.
in this like part of history, there's Margaret of Anjou, Margaret Beaufort, and Elizabeth Woodville, and all of them are like tiger mothers.
Yep.
Fighting for their babies.
Yep.
Absolutely.
So they marry Warwick's daughter Anne to Margaret's son Edward.
Somebody
oh my
Edward!
God! Can you please stop? This is just like hearkening back to like Cleo with Ptolemy.
Oh my God.
Oh my God. Stop with the names.
The only thing Margaret and Warwick had in common literally was their shared hatred for Liza.
Yeah, it's
Like-
so fucking sad that she got like the shit end of the stick
Fucking
on all of it.
patriarchy.
Amen to that.
But
She gets pregnant.
she's pregnant again. I mean,
Damn, girl, she's fertile.
she's big and pregnant at this point too. So Eddie's like, hey, I need to go fight. And she's like, like 8 months pregnant. So they send her to the Tower of London for like safekeeping, because that was like the place to go at that time.
Yeah, that's where you were safe. You were able to
Yeah.
put a safe haven. And around the time Warwick and the Lancastrians get in formation.
Come on, Lancastrians, now let's get information.
Beep, beep, beep. So Elizabeth receives the message of this realness, and
They're like, this is a real threat. This is not a
fucking
drill.
real. And
Get yourself to sanctuary.
right? So she
and that's what she
flees
does.
to Westminster. Okay, and she declares sanctuary, kind of sort of like the Hunchback of Notre Dame. sort of like you're a criminal. And that's what I read is like when you declared sanctuary, when she was in sanctuary, there was like criminals and like thieves,
I'm sure.
and it smelled
I'm
really
sure
bad.
she probably had. They probably put
She
her
got
somewhere
posted
else.
up something else, but I mean, she still had to like. I mean, she was around people
With her,
that
so she
wouldn't
brought
wanna
her
be
3
around.
daughters or 4 daughters, whatever she had at this time, big and pregnant, goes to sanctuary. Eddie flees to Burgundy because his family are like the dukes and duchesses of
So,
Burgundy.
side note, there's no fucking monarchy in London at the time. There's no kings, queens, nothing. So, there literally anarchy breaks out.
It was anarchy.
Anarchy! There's like prison breaks, people are beating each other up, mobs, looting, and she's like fucking pregnant as well. And often nobody's there to hold down the fort. She gives birth in sanctuary at Westminster.
And finally, it's a boy. Whereas it's just such a weird part of history for me. Like if she would have had this boy in the palace, it would have been like celebration for days. But she finally has her boy in sanctuary. Nobody knows. Like she can't celebrate. She can just sit there with the nuns and be like, cool.
Cool.
But I bet she the whole time was nervous that like somebody was going to storm in and try to kill her and her son. Like it was
oh hell yeah,
it was an absolute.
She's around a bunch of murderers and burglars.
Well, no, but somebody from the Lancastrians, it's like, oh, now she's got a son, because when she just had daughters, who the fuck cared? But now that she's got a son, what's gonna stop some Lancastrian force from like coming in and just being like, sanctuary, LOL, I'm killing this bitch, I'm killing this baby.
Yep.
You know?
And she was there for like 6 months.
She was there for 6 months.
And I honestly think that Warwick and Maggie Anjou would have been happy to have her and just die there.
Rot and die.
Like
problem done.
Okay, so
solved.
real talk, how fucking scared do you think she was at that time?
I think she was scared shitless. Like absolutely, like just probably like every day. You know how when you have stress dreams about work?
Yeah, I mean,
but it was like that, except 10 times worse every night that she tried to
she
sleep.
totally had a son that would like solidify her, like the throne.
And that son going away would make the Lancastrians' job so much easier.
And she was found really weird as like Henry VI, who was like sort of kind of claiming the throne at the time.
Definitely claiming the throne.
And not sort of kind of, but definitely claiming it. But he like started sending money and food.
Well, okay, so a thing about Henry VI is that like he's known to be extremely pious. I read that, I mean, it took him and his wife a long, long time to conceive their only child because he'd always been told his whole life that sex was a sin. So, like, he wouldn't even have sex with his wife. So he was just a really pious person. So I do think it was Christian charity to a point of him sending her food. But also, I think he was unstable.
Yeah, a wee bit unstable.
He was a little bit unstable.
I think he was weird as fuck. I mean, I think he honestly wanted to tap that shit secretly. Like,
apparently everybody did. So.
Yeah, I know. Like, he was just sending her food, and like, I read it was like half a beef, 2 muttons, a lady to wait on her, a fishmonger for Friday Catholic dinner.
Fishmonger.
Like, what the hell? Like, I think he wanted to tap that shit.
It's quite possible.
Anyway,
so. George deflects from Warwick because, surprise, surprise, you can't count on fucking Clarence. And
so Eddie's coming back.
Eddie's coming back. There's the Battle of Barnet, which is Warwick's troops against Eddie's troops, and Warwick is killed.
Boy, bye.
Something ironic that I find about the whole sanctuary thing. In this Battle of Barnet, like, there were men from the Lancastrian side that, like, fled and claimed sanctuary. Edward had these dudes pulled out of sanctuary.
Damn.
And killed, like, on the steps of the church.
Damn, bro.
Did he know his wife was in sanctuary? Like, or did he...
I think he may have, and maybe that's what he was doing, is be like, you're in sanctuary, fuck it. Like,
But please don't do this to my wife also. Like, I don't...
Right.
I just find that really interesting because that was, like, a huge scandal at the time. You didn't pull people out of sanctuary. But Eddie was just like, get them.
Bah.
This ends now, is what he is saying.
And funny enough...
So he takes the crown back.
Henry VI conveniently...
Yeah. So,
gets sick and dies.
Well, Edward, the... Prince of Wales of the Lancastrians, dies in battle, and then they take Henry VI into the Tower of London to be a prisoner. And I mean, who knows if he even had his wits about him? He didn't fucking know what was
Poor
going on.
fucking Henry VI.
Poor fucking Henry VI.
He
is
was
like
not living in the same world that everybody else was
no,
living
but
in.
so
wasn't.
he gets taken prisoner and put in the Tower of London and dies about a month later. The official reports say of melancholy.
Bitch was killed.
He was killed.
Straight up.
And you know, like, poor Henry VI, but there needed to be peace.
Yeah.
And after that, there was relative peace in England for a really long time.
The royal family was back,
Yeah.
bitch.
Her reputation was actually really improved by this whole scenario because medieval people, you know what? Much like today's people, love a story of damsel in distress, handsome king comes in, saves her and her newborn baby boy.
Yep.
And after that, like,
born in sanctuary. Like, there's just this whole, like, innocence.
She's given
like,
England
beauty.
an heir. It did her reputation good to be viewed as like this damsel of distress. And once she had her son, she did kind of stop focusing on politics. And I think a big part of that is Warwick was dead. And she hated him for killing her father. And now she had her
chance to shine.
She was like, whatever. I give up. You run England. I'm going to worry about my babies.
Time to pop out some more fucking babies.
Yep.
Hashtag blessed.
Yes.
Like, in this time period, hashtag blessed.
And it's a miracle. Like, none of these are noted as being necessarily difficult labors. She never talked about, like, having a hard recovery or anything. She was just a baby-making machine.
She had a daughter named Margaret who, she sadly died before the first birthday, but she had another boy named Richard.
This gives me rage. It gives me rage that they named him Richard because she already had a son from her first marriage named Richard. And Richard. She already had a Richard. But no, like, how fucking confusing. My son Richard. Which one?
I don't know. The second one.
Pick some other names. Anyway, then she had another daughter named Anne, another son named George who died.
Two more daughters, Catherine and Bridget. They were born like back to back, 1479 and 1480. They got busy.
She started having babies in 1466 by Edward. She started having Edward's babies in 1466 and had her last one by 1480. So she had given birth to 10 kids in 14 years.
Her poor vagina.
Her poor everything. She
mean,
must have been, because also back then, after you gave birth, so before you gave birth, about 6 weeks before you gave birth, a queen would go into confinement. And then after you had the baby, you had like another 6 weeks in confinement.
Well, we did Catherine of Aragon, which is the same
so
thing.
that's like 3 months. So she couldn't worry about any policies or anything. She just had to assume everything was going okay, because every 6 months out of, what was it, 14 years, she had to be locked up. What do you think about confinement? Like, I've heard people be like, well, that just sounds great. And I'm like, okay, well, that sounds great if you had Netflix.
Totally true.
Or like, still got, like, maybe if she got real stir crazy, they'd let her go outside and like walk around on a terrace or some shit.
It sounds miserable to me.
That sounds, I mean,
I'm already claustrophobic, so like.
Claustrophobic?
Claustrophobic.
How do you pronounce
Claustrophobic.
Claustrophobic? It's one of those words when you say it too many times, it doesn't sound like a word anymore.
Claustrophobic.
This wine is strong.
Like all the windows shut, everything shut out.
But
no
for
light.
3 months and then labor and then another 3 months of that, nah. I need to go out and see people. Like,
poor fucking Elizabeth. Like,
yeah.
Anyway.
She never complained though.
She
never complained once.
Nope. And after all this, like, this makes me sad. Jacquetta dies.
Jacquetta dies.
Her mama dies.
And they had always been super close. So her mom dies in 1472, which is like a month after her daughter Margaret died.
How heartbreaking. Like,
she would have been absolutely heartbroken.
Oh my God. Losing your mother and losing your child is like a fucking big deal. And on top of that, like, Edward's got his little wandering eye.
So modern day people.
Yeah.
We should not try to assign our modern day thoughts and views of these things to these people of the medieval ages.
No, hell no.
even though infidelity has always been frowned upon, because it says in the Bible not to do it, a king was expected to get it wherever he wanted to get it.
Oh, hell yeah.
Edward was very handsome and like very charismatic.
So he's expected to have one. There's only one mistress that really makes it into the history books.
Yeah, there was one mistress called Jane Shore, which actually her name, nobody called her Jane in her time. There was like a playwright a couple of generations after she died that wrote a play about her, and there was just too many. I think her name was Elizabeth. Like there was just too many. I could be wrong. I could be wrong, but it was some like really common name like that, and they were like, "Oh, there's too many. Let's just call her Jane." But she's the only one that makes it down the line. So he got it wherever he wanted to, but he wasn't like Edward or Henry VIII, that he never tried to put Elizabeth aside. Mm-hmm. And he didn't flaunt his mistresses. He didn't like bring them to like state dinners. Elizabeth was always his main chick. Like, and he never disrespected her in public or anything.
I guess that's nice of him.
I guess that's nice. Again, I'm trying to like not put my own modern day
stigma on it.
Yeah, I'm trying to think from like the standpoint of a medieval queen, even though some people say this time period is medieval and some people say this is just like just post-medieval, early Renaissance, whatever. Try to put my mind frame as hers would be, and it may be like, I don't like that my husband's sleeping around, but I'm still got a pretty cush life.
Yeah, well, I mean, she came from a common life to be a fucking queen.
Yeah.
So she understands it.
So
let's go back to George, the Duke of Clarence, you know.
Remember that guy? They
were
never friends.
No, they never really fucking liked each other.
They never liked each other.
But George, the Duke of Clarence, was the most...
Very tumultuous. So George was plotting to overthrow Edward. He started spreading rumors about Edward being illegitimate, blah, 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 blah. I mean, really, I think George had always been kind of unstable. But in 1477, his wife Isabel died, Warwick's eldest daughter. So she died of a childbed fever.
But George didn't believe that Izzy died of that natural cause, and said he blamed... Elizabeth for fucking witchcraft.
He was like, she put a spell on her.
She's a witch.
He also blamed one of their servants for poisoning her. So, pick your fucking story, dude.
Yeah, I know. George is like a goddamn loose cannon.
That poor servant, though, he had trialed for murder or whatever and, had hanged.
Ugh.
So that poor chick.
And they start, plotting against Edward again.
Edward has had fucking enough.
He throws George in the Tower of London and has him convicted of treason.
Which means death.
Yeah, it does.
100% of the time. I mean, George had plenty of chances to get his fucking act together.
Do you think Elizabeth was pulling for it?
Yes. He had a big part in killing her dad and brother. She was out for blood. And you know what? There was never going to be peace in their family until George was out of the picture.
Maybe, I guess. I just think, all these haters had to pin everything on her. And I think it was Edward's decision.
Oh, it was always in the end Edward's decision. But I definitely think Elizabeth was like, look, we're never going to be able to just be until he's gone.
Yeah. And so the legend goes that Edward gave George the choice of which way he has to die. And he knew that Elizabeth's favorite wine was Momsy wine.
Cheers, bitch.
Cheers. And the legend goes that he chose to be drowned in a tub of Momsy wine.
That's fun. So on February 17th, 1478, George, Duke of Clarence, was executed for treason, and a tub of wine may or may not have been involved. But after George is gone, they really don't have any hiccups.
No, there were no rebellions coming up.
No rebellions. No Lancastrian forces trying to overturn them.
Fucking shit, Edward falls ill.
Before he died, though, he did have time to sort out his will.
He named his brother Richard, Duke of
Gloucester.
No, I can't even fucking say that shit. He was the Lord Protector of his son and the Prince of Wales, who was still a minority.
Yeah, he was super young. Elizabeth probably would have had some reservations about this. Her and Richard I mean, they never enjoyed like a warm relationship, but it was never a tumultuous relationship. But her son had been in Wales doing King Training 101 under the guidance of her brother Anthony, who like she was very close with. So she probably wanted Edward, the Prince of Wales, to continue his training, his King 101 training with Anthony. Elizabeth signed up. She was like, yes, whatever your will says. And then Edward died April 9th, 1483.
So, sad things.
Like the probably of pneumonia, but also he didn't take very good care of himself at the end of his life there. Like he was doing a lot of drinking, eating.
Well, I mean, he was involved in a lot of fuck wars and shit.
He was
like
tired.
That. Yeah, he was tired. Girl.
Tired.
So the prince heads to London.
Liza sends a note being like, we need to get him crowned like yesterday before we lose power.
And Anthony Woodville, which is Liza's son, Richard Grey, the prince, aka Edward V. Fucking Edwards everywhere.
So many Edwards and Richards. So they start their journey. So yeah, it's Anthony Woodville, Richard Grey, the prince, and like their crew, like their posse. They start their journey from Wales to London about a week after the king's death.
They were met by Richard, the Duke of Gloucester, who took young Edward, and then Anthony and Richard Grey were arrested and soon after executed.
Like, again, like there was no real trial or anything. They were executed just for being Liza's family.
Ugh.
And Liza find out what happened to her brother and son, freaks the fuck out. Edward V now is being taken to the Tower of London for quote unquote safekeeping.
That's until his coronation.
Richard was like, no, I'm gonna take them to safekeeping in the Tower of London until we can get his coronation ready. And like the plan was to have his coronation about a week later. Liza very smartly is like, I don't trust you. She grabs all her daughters and her one remaining son, Richard, the other Richard, and hightails it back to Sanctuary.
Sanctuary the sequel.
And Richard then went to Liza and is like, Edward is like really lonely and he wants his brother Richard, the Duke of York, for a companion. And then this is right after they decided, like after they get Edward to the tower, they're like, oh, you know what? It's been really bad weather. We're going to push the coronation back a week. And then they go to Liza and they're like, he wants his brother as a companion. Which I think at that point, if she thought that anything was going to happen to her second son, she would have never relinquished possession of him.
No.
So I think at this point, Richard isn't her favorite for killing her brother and other son.
Huh?
But
that's an understatement.
Like she does legitimately think, I believe, that this son is going to be safe in the tower. They've got 1 million guards. He's going to be with his uncle. Okay, fine. And that was a mistake.
And she fucking hands them over. And why would she do that?
I just don't think she thought it was a threat like that it ended up being. I thought the uncle had their best interest at heart.
I fucking think that she was drinking too much of this goddamn wine.
It was starting to become apparent that Richard had no intentions of ever crowning Edward.
Coronation back and back and
pushing
back
it back.
And then Richard hears a rumor that Edward was actually already married when he married Liza.
Takes like wildfire.
God, it burns.
He's just like starts spreading it everywhere, starts getting all these people to sign on and being
my God, their marriage is never valid.
Yeah, and
the
so
princes in the tower are illegitimate.
Yeah, so they strip Elizabeth of all her titles.
Of course.
And they strip the princes in the tower and all her daughters of their titles too.
Fucking patriarchy.
And Elizabeth starts being officially called Dame Grey again.
What a bitches. Those
Fuck,
fucking
she's
bitches.
Been queen
and
for so fucking long.
He, being Richard, declares himself king.
Yeah. He's like, so since Duke of Clarence was a traitor, so his son can't inherit, and these boys are now bastards, so they can't inherit. Oh, how convenient.
No.
King now.
Oh, how awesome is that? Fucking asshole.
Speaking of the princes in the tower, In the summer of 1483, Edward and Richard start to be seen less and less. I think it's June of 1483 was the last time they were seen like playing in the Tower grounds. And they were just straight up never seen again.
So what do you think happened?
Oh my God, we could do a whole episode
on that.
On Princes in the Tower theories. There's so many theories. It doesn't matter. We're looking at it from the viewpoint of Liza, and
at this time, Richard declares himself king as
Has her
Richard
stripped
III, the villain of all time.
Hunchback and I don't think he was anywhere near as bad as everybody paints him as.
Well, that's Shakespeare.
That's Shakespeare made him that big villain, but I definitely think he's a little shady.
And I don't think Liza trusted that motherfucker at all.
So Liza strikes up an unusual friendship, or an unlikely friendship, I should say, with Margaret Beaufort. Beaufort claimed that her own son, Henry Tudor, had a claim to the throne as the last of the Lancastrian bloodline.
Her and Maggie B shared a doctor, and they would actually pass notes to each other back and forth, hey girl, I heard this shit.
Oh, I heard this shit. Well, we're going to do this. Well, we're going to do this.
And they actually concocted a plan that when Henry Tudor came and took the crown, that he would marry Liza's eldest daughter, Elizabeth, and finally put an end to the Wars of the Roses.
Yeah, because she was York, he was Lancastrian, and her remaining son, Thomas Grey, hightailed it out of the country and went and joined Henry Tudor.
And so she left Sanctuary. She entered Sanctuary in 1483, and in March 1484, she left Sanctuary with her daughters.
Richard basically begged her to come out of Sanctuary.
Come
it
on,
looked
girl.
so bad to him, that, oh, my sister-in-law is hiding from me in Sanctuary and all her daughters and everything. So he was like, please come out. Oh my God. It's a PR nightmare, dude.
You're making me look like an asshole.
So he wrote out this oath to her about, and I won't go through it verbatim. It's very interesting. The Queens of England podcast, and I think it's his third Elizabeth Woodville episode. Go listen to that. He does a great interpretation of this oath. But let me just hit the talking points. Please come out of Sanctuary. You're making me look like an ass.
If you come out of Sanctuary, your daughters will be given this great ass position at court.
I'll personally make sure they're treated well and they won't be raped or molested.
Okay.
Which I feel that really need to be said.
Please don't. I won't put your kids in the fucking tower.
I'll make sure your daughters are married off to people of good positions.
And you'll get a goddamn good pension, bitch.
So with her plot with Maggie B in formation, and she accepted his oath.
I really bet that was fucking scary for her.
If she really believed that Richard had her sons killed, yeah, it must have been risky for her.
Ugh.
Life back at court. Her daughters are all given positions as ladies of waiting to Richard's wife, Anne Neville, which was the kingmaker's daughter.
Liza is still conniving with that shady lady bitch, Maggie Beaufort.
I don't think they were ever friends, but you know the old saying, the enemy of my enemy is my friend.
True story.
Back at court for about a year and a half before Liza and Maggie's plan starts to come to fruition.
Here comes
the Battle of Bosworth.
A horse, my kingdom for a horse.
I read somewhere that this is actually what a lot of historians view as the end of the medieval time in England, the Battle of Bosworth. I don't usually find reading about battles particularly interesting, but this one is fucking fascinating. Do yourself a favor, just go and find some YouTube documentaries or something about the Battle of Bosworth. It's very interesting. We won't go into it. Here's the cliff notes. Henry Tudor lands in England and he wants his crown and he wants his bride. He's made an oath that he'll marry Elizabeth York, Liza's eldest daughter, as soon as he's made king.
Richard takes the field, unsure of what fucking side some of his allies were on, and his assumed allies were Maggie Beaufort, her
husband, yeah.
And he predictably deflected, obviously, and went to Team Tudor.
Hashtag Team Tudor. And Richard gets unhorsed and killed pretty nastily and thrown into an unmarked grave.
They actually did like this. There's like a Netflix documentary on it where they like pulled it up and they were like, no, this is where he was buried. And they like had like a thing in his skull and blah, blah, blah. So anyway, it's Tudor time.
My in-laws bought me that book about that. So the Netflix, like there's the book and then there's the documentary.
Yeah.
I couldn't get past like the 30th page of the book because
I bet it's a lot of archaeology and like
no,
digging.
it's a lot of them applying for permits to dig.
Boring.
So I just watched the documentary and then told them thank you very much for the book. It looks very good on my shelf and makes me look very smart.
So anyway, it's fucking Tudor time.
Tudor time. Tudor time.
Henry Tudor is now Henry VII, and he marries Elizabeth of York, a.k.a. Elizabeth's daughter.
Yeah.
And reinstates Elizabeth's title.
As Dowager Queen.
Yes.
And makes all the kids legitimate again.
She receives the pension and some lands, and things are fucking looking up for her.
Yeah, and Henry VII was stingy,
to say the least.
And Maggie Beaufort had created like this title that never existed before, My Lady the King's Mother. And so he was spending a lot of dough on Maggie, and they just got tired of footing the bill for Liza's to have an extravagant lifestyle herself. So her pension was less than expected.
So once again, she's viewed as this suspicious little bitch.
Well,
there's
an uprising from like old York supporters.
Yeah. And
it was up in the north, and there was whispers that Liza was like funding it.
This guy was like pretending to be the Earl of Warwick.
Edward, yeah. So, okay, George, Duke of Clarence, had a son named Edward, and that son was locked up in the Tower of London. Again, we talk about him in the Catherine of Aragon episode. But yeah, this guy up in York, since nobody had seen that son and nobody really knew where he was, this guy whose name was Lambert Simnel was claiming to be
Edward Plantagenet,
who was now the de facto Earl of Warwick. The rebellion was squashed like pretty quickly. I find it unlikely that Elizabeth Woodville would have had anything to do with this.
No.
Why she's
out of the spotlight.
Her daughter is now queen, and she has a grandson, Arthur, at this time. Why would she do anything to hurt her daughter?
Spotlight.
And why would she do anything to hurt her daughter and her grandson? I do feel like her just being at court, though, did cause tension. Her daughter and her now son-in-law, the king, Henry VII.
And that was the damage that was done.
Yeah.
And people were suspicious of that. And that was the thing that started the fucking rumors.
And I think that's when she decided, you know what, I'm just going to retire to an abbey. So,
I mean, to be real, that's a great thing to do. If I was a woman of like, what?
Well, I mean, there's also rumors. She was in her 50s, which
50s.
back then was really old. And there was also rumors that as punishment for that uprising, Henry sent her, because there's no clear reason in the history books why she retired to the abbey. But that was a really common thing for women of means to do back then.
It was. I mean, we've already...
widows, yeah.
Yeah, you were sent to like an abbey or...
Well, that was a really common thing for people to do like on their own accord. Like, it's an easy place to go retire.
But
you're
when
just going to
you're
sew
widowed,
and read.
When you've lived your life, you've had a husband, you've had kids.
Yeah, a lot of the history books and stuff do read it as she was banished to this abbey. I personally think she went of her own accord. I think she was just like, yo, I'm tired.
And what makes me think of that is like all her lands were like transferred to her kids. Yeah. Everything was done.
I think she was like, I'm causing drama here. I just want to go sew and talk to some nuns all day.
She was doing it out of respect for her daughter.
That's what I think. And her children visited her regularly, which I think shows that there wasn't strife. Because if she was like this outcast that the king didn't trust, then they may have like separated themselves from her.
And obviously she was treated really well.
She was the queen's mother, so
duh.
No shit. So sadly, she did pass away in 1492.
Is that when Columbus sailed the ocean?
Was it?
Mind blown. Okay, so she did live to see the birth of her royal grandchildren, Arthur, as mentioned earlier, Princess Margaret, and Henry, aka Henry VIII.
Maybe you've heard of him.
I don't know if you have or not.
She had a very small funeral. And that was in her will. In her will, she put that she wanted a very small, not huge or grand funeral. But of course, many people shamed Henry VII for giving her a small funeral. And it's like, this bitch couldn't win. If she would have had a big funeral, everybody would have been like, oh, the commoner queen,
she's
spending all our money.
Spending all our money.
And then when she said she wanted a small funeral, they're like, he couldn't even shell out some dough for his
damned
former
if
queen.
You do, damned if you don't.
I think she requested a small funeral again because she didn't want to cause strife between the king and her daughter. Do you agree?
I agree.
Yeah, so a queen can't win. But her daughter Elizabeth sadly couldn't attend the funeral because she was in confinement for her fourth child. But all the other children did come.
So she's buried next to Edward in St. George's Cathedral in Windsor Castle.
So
that's so cute.
That's
they're like soulmates, y'all.
I really think
they're soulmates. We're soulmates, y'all.
So Liza with a W and her legacy. While she didn't really affect policy much, her presence alone changed the course of history.
No matter what she did in her time, she was viewed fucking negatively because she was a commoner queen. But
I think she's getting a boost now.
I mean, she actively had a role in ending a stupid fucking civil war in England by arranging the marriage of her daughter to the next king.
And founding the Tudor dynasty, which people are still obsessed with to this day.
Cheers to Elizabeth Woodville.
To fucking Liza. You badass bitch. You beautiful, beautiful thing, you.